Hello everyone. Today we are going to be talking about phrasal verbs. Now, what are phrasal verbs? Phrasal verbs refer to idiomatic expressions that combine verbs and prepositions or adverbs to create new verbs with meanings that are different from the meaning of the individual words. Okay, so phrasal verbs are going to be a combination of a verb and a preposition or an adverb, and together they form a new meaning. Okay, this is why they're called idiomatic, because they are fixed. So the verb and the preposition, or the verb and the adverb, will have a new meaning, right? Then a new meaning that is different from the meaning of the individual words that make up the phrasal verb. So examples of phrasal verbs would be give up, give in, take out, take in, take away, etc., etc. Okay? Now I said verb plus preposition or verb plus adverb. So let me give you an example of each. So an example of a phrasal verb comprising a verb and a preposition would be look after, right? Because after would be a preposition, given that we require an object, because you need something or someone to receive the action. You need to look after someone or something. So look after would be an example of a verb plus a preposition. Now let's look at a verb plus an adverb. Run away. Okay? Away would be an adverb modifying run because it's giving us it is telling us where to run. Like, let's assume that this is a command. It's telling us where to run. Run away. Okay? So those are two examples of phrasal verbs. Look after and run away. Now, phrasal verbs are often ideal, or let's just say it's better to use them in informal contexts because because of the fact that you're having verbs and prepositions and adverbs right together, it can produce misunderstandings at times because prepositions in general and adverbs are difficult. So these are going to be very challenging for students or persons who are learning English as a second language. So it's best to use these in informal contexts, right? But in formal contexts, a single word equivalent or a single verb would be better. For example, take off. Instead of saying take off, we can say remove, like remove your clothes, right? Instead of saying call off, we could say cancel, right? So a single word equivalent is better for formal context because it reduces the possibility of misunderstanding, all right? Now let's go into, let's look at, and of course, I'm using lots of phrasal verbs, right? As I communicate with you guys. But let's see the different types of phrasal verbs. So phrasal verbs can be classified as transitive, intransitive, separable, or inseparable. Okay. Of course, each of these properties we are going to look at, right? We're going to examine. But let's start with transitive phrasal verbs. Transitive phrasal verbs refer to those which require a direct object. So transitive phrasal verbs are going to be just like transitive verbs. They require a direct object to be complete, right? Example, Chris has to look after his business. You can't say Chris has to look after because you require an object. That verb requires an object, right? So the object here would be his business, okay? So when it comes to separable phrasal verbs, and that's probably an unfamiliar term, all that is referring to is the placement of the direct object. Okay? So with separable phrasal verbs, the verb and prepositions can be separated. Okay. So we're talking about separable. Alright, so in this case, a preposition has to be involved. A direct object has to be involved. Right? Otherwise, it wouldn't be separable. Okay? So, let's look at the example. You can switch the lights off. You can switch off the lights. What's the difference? There is no difference. Both of these sentences mean the same thing. The only difference is that in the first sentence, the direct object occurs between the verb and the preposition, whereas in the second sentence, the direct object appears at the end of the phrasal verb, i.e. the verb and the preposition, right? So that's what separable means. It means that the direct object has some flexibility in where it can occur. But this is not going to be the case for every phrasal verb, all right? So of course, separable phrasal verbs will relate to transitive verbs because transitive phrasal verbs require direct objects, right? But you see that there are two different placements here. But like I said, not all transitive verbs are going to be separable. So let's see what inseparable means, right? So with inseparable phrasal verbs, the verb and preposition or adverb must be together. All right. So obviously that's the opposite. So with separable phrasal verbs, the direct object can go between the verb and the preposition or after the verb and preposition, right? So that means that the verb and preposition can be separated, okay? But transitive verbs can also be inseparable, right? Let me give you an example. Come between. Those have to go together. Come and between always have to be together. You can't say nothing can come us between. No, those have to go together. Nothing can come between us. So come between would be an example of an inseparable transitive verb because it needs an object. Therefore, it would be inseparable. So a transitive verb can be separable or inseparable. All right. Now let's go back to the placement. Now you would see here switch off would be one of those verbs that that the direct object can occur in two places, right? But there are some rules when it comes to the placement. But generally, if the direct object is referring to a specific thing or like a specific person, then you can have that flexibility like we see here because the lights would be a specific thing. However, if we're using pronouns, the pronouns must, if a pronoun is the direct object, the pronoun must go between the verb and the preposition, right? Must, that's a must, all right? For example, let in, the phrasal verb let in. So we have to say we let him in. We can't say we let in him. We let him in. Another example, throw away. We would have to say he threw it away. We can't say he threw away it. He threw it away. So if a pronoun is a direct object, it must go between the verb and the preposition. All right. So that will cover transitive phrasal verbs. Transitive phrasal verbs can be separable, meaning that the direct object can go between the verb and the preposition. And transitive verbs can also be inseparable because in some of those cases, the verb, in some of those cases, the verb and the preposition must be together, right? All right, so let's move on to intransitive phrasal verbs. So intransitive phrasal verbs refer to those which do not require direct objects, right? So an example of that would be passed away. Mark passed away. Obviously, we don't need an object there, right? So away would be an adverb because it's giving you the place. And remember, adverbs do not require adverbs modify verbs. So there's no need for an object. So that would obviously mean that all intransitive phrasal verbs are inseparable because there's no direct object, right? So remember, it says here the verb and preposition are adverbs. So obviously the adverb would refer to intransitive phrasal verbs, whereas the preposition would refer to transitive phrasal verbs, right? So example, the thief ran away. That does not require an object. So that would be inseparable because ran and away will have to be together no matter what. All right? So those are inseparable phrasal verbs. So transitive verbs, phrasal verbs, can be separable or inseparable, whereas intransitive phrasal verbs can only be inseparable. Okay? All right? That will be the end of this lesson. I hope that I was able to provide clarity on this topic. I want to thank you for watching and see you in the next one.